Hello, dearly cherished anointed ones. When they couldn't figure you out, they studied you under a microscope, hoping to find out what they feared. Allow it to sink in, for this is the shocking reality. You are not only being watched, you're being studied like a unique phenomenon. Not because you're noisy, not because you are flashy, but because you overcame the odds and evaded systems created to kill you. They are now unable to look away. You did not violate any rules. You've created a new game. You did not just survive what was meant to kill you. You transform it into power. And somewhere in the background, they're scrambling for their notes, thinking, wait, how did they do that? With no aid, no cheat code, and a lot of spiritual pain. Let's be real. At this moment, you resemble spiritual Wi-Fi. You are moving invisibly between dimensions, but there is still buffering. Here's something most people don't know. Elite institutions, technological companies, and even the government are spending billions of dollars to research unusual behavior. Why? Because those that do not fit are the ones who create problems in the system. So guess what? You are not just an outlier. You're the unforeseen glitch in the matrix. In this video, we pull the curtain completely back. We're getting to the real reason you're being probed. Why your existence seems like a divine interruption, and how your whole being has become a silent resistance against a lie-filled society. Ready? Buckle up. They never intended you to grasp what you are about to hear. Number 1, you did not just survive. You outwitted the device intended to remove you. You didn't just survive. You outwitted the device intended to remove you. That is why everyone is watching. That is why they are now staring at you in confusion. Because you were not supposed to go this far. The system was designed to enable you to break down quietly, constantly question yourself, and eventually collapse into the precise form you were made to destroy. They gave you tales about who you were and who you could never be. They offered you crumbs and expected gratitude. You were placed in situations where speaking out meant being ostracized, power was linked with rage, and your intelligence was either rejected or taken. They were not just hoping you would fail. They constructed the playing field so that you wouldn't realize how powerful you are. But somehow you read between the lines. You learn to speak quietly. You learn to recognize the manipulation hidden behind friendship, the gaslighting disguised as concern, and the jealousy posing as advice. Others wanted comfort. You asked clarification. You didn't settle for survival. You disassembled every pattern intended to trap you. You spotted the flaws in the culture, the flaws in the brainwashing, and the fake smiles that mask actual envy. Instead of becoming bitter, you became sharper, wiser, quieter, and much more damaging to anything based on control. That's what they don't understand. How you escaped without a guidebook. How you kept your soul clean while swimming through pollutants. How you came out, not just breathing, but blazing. And now they don't know what to do with you. You're not broken or naive. You do not desire revenge. However, you are definitely not allowing access. They probe you because you become something the system did not expect. A restored soul rises to entire consciousness with memory, purpose, and vision. You stepped through every psychological trap and yet remembered who you were. That concerns others, especially those who only know how to lead via dishonesty. You are not just surviving anymore. You're prospering in an environment where you weren't expected to thrive. That's not luck. That's mastery. That's divine knowledge clothed in human flesh. And no matter how closely they observe, there is one thing they cannot replicate. Your soul has not folded. Number 2, your tenacity is not just emotional. It is an intellectual war. Resilience entails more than just having a strong heart or the capacity to recover from trauma. It goes far deeper than that. People are especially interested with your strategic strength. You did not just mourn, heal, and go on. You evaluated the pattern, calculated the setting, and made mental notes while everyone believed you were broken. They underestimated you, but you enhanced your thinking. They figured you'd stay down since you were quiet. What they didn't realize was that you were quietly downloading everything. You were researching conversations, energy manipulation, methods, subtle disrespect, bogus support, and coded jealousy. You weren't only dealing emotionally with the turmoil. You were building an internal library of how the game was played. That is the part that puzzles people. You weren't just emotionally strong. You were intellectually advanced. You also said that they only arrived when there was an audience. You grabbed those who rejoiced in your suffering, but then departed after your recuperation. You saw patterns of sabotage disguised as kindness. And the whole time, you pretended not to notice. But your mind was capturing everything. Not for revenge, but to understand. Because when your spirit is chosen and your brain is cultivated, you can do more than just live. You rise using receipts. You no longer avoid your feelings. You move away from knowledge. And now that you're out of survival mode, everyone can see you've never been sluggish. You were strategic. You weren't confused. You were collecting data. You were not passive. You were waiting to see how far they'd go. And now you're 10 steps ahead of the people who tried to study you. This is why you cannot continue to play as you did before. You understand spiritual and psychological warfare. You comprehend the code that drives people's activities. You developed a way to protect your energy without revealing it. Most people will never have access to such intelligence. Not because they are unable, but because they have never paused long enough to see through the illusion you built. They are now studying you not because you are just strong, but because you have raised strength to the level of art. You turn survival into strategy. And that level of brilliance does not just shine. It exposes. Number 3. You are living proof that spiritual purity can outweigh social power. You are living proof that spiritual purity can outweigh social power. That is what perplexes individuals in a society that prioritizes looks, clout, and reputation. You refuse to play by their rules. You didn't pretend to be friends only to go ahead in life. You did not give up your values to get popularity. You did not tone down your individuality to blend in with spiritually impoverished individuals. And despite the connections, awards, and recognition you rose, that's what makes people stop and stare. They don't understand how you achieved without selling out. They expected you to give up, cooperate, buckle under pressure, and play their game. They reasoned that if they rejected you long enough, ridiculed you harshly enough, and isolated you enough, they would succeed. You would eventually give in and start seeking their concept of success. But you didn't. Even when you felt lonely, you remained loyal to yourself. Even if it means sacrificing opportunities, relationships, and comfort. You did not use shortcuts. You picked a course that needed you to build real character. Now you go into rooms with an obvious presence. People can see that you did not obtain your influence via platform. You earned it by hard work, obedience, and spiritual progress. That's unsettling for those who have built their lives on facades. You expose what is missing in them without even trying. That's why they're monitoring you. That's why everyone is talking about you. This is why they secretly envy you. Because you have what they cannot purchase, alignment. The same folks that had previously disregarded you. I am now interested in you. They had a social influence, but lacked depth. They now look to you for guidance, even if they won't admit it. You did not become who you are only via looks. You accomplished it via inner mastery, making you unstoppable in a performance-driven environment. You did not climb your way to power. You encouraged it by being candid. And now you are live proof that genuine authority comes from the soul, not the spotlight. That is the kind of power that will never disappear. That is the kind of power they cannot replicate. That is why they are researching you. Number 4, they investigated you since you were the first individual who didn't need their permission. You become a threat the moment you stop seeking their approval. Until then, they had leverage. You were predictable as long as you aimed to get their favor. Easy to manage and alter. But once you sever the cord, everything changed. You stopped dancing for their approval or changing your truth to make others happy. You went from pleasing others to focusing on yourself. And it broke the edifice they built around you. They were not prepared for someone who could govern without affection. Society drives people to seek approval like oxygen. Fit in, shrink down, be pleasant, and get praise. That is the unsaid agreement. But you ripped the contract in half. You've stopped performing. You started to choose serenity over popularity and purpose above permission. And now you move with a degree of freedom that most people cannot understand. It perplexes them because, in their world, confirmation is money, approval is power, and status is everything. And here you are, creating new moves and flying higher without asking anybody to sign off. That does not fit their model. So they're looking into you. They see how you move about an area without trying to dominate it. They observe how you are seen without seeking to impress. They try to figure out how someone with your background can walk with absolute confidence. What they really want to know is how you got rid of your desire for them. Because they are still prisoners, trapped in a cycle of behaving for attention, conforming to fit in, and chasing power. They don't even believe in you. On the other hand, you like to like yourself more than they could. That was the reset. At that time, everything started to orbit in a new way. And now your determination to gain approval is what makes you desirable. Because actual confidence, as opposed to superficial attention, is rare. When you become a leader who doesn't need to be liked, you accomplish more than just standing out. You influence the atmosphere. They didn't expect you to evolve beyond their control, but you did. And now they're left trying to find out what they couldn't control. Number 5, you failed to comply with safety precautions. You created safety with your own spirit. You didn't do what most people do to live. You didn't conform, give up, or betray yourself to be comfortable while others compromise their truth. To retain a favorable reputation inside systems, cliques, and families, you chose a whole other way. You did not comply with the requirements to be protected. You learned how to protect yourself without trying to be someone else. That decision changed everything. You weren't supported. You didn't. You were often rejected, misunderstood, misrepresented, and sometimes targeted. However, you gave up waiting for someone to come and save you. You stopped expecting a secure zone to be provided to you. Instead, you constructed one. Not outdoors, but within your own spirit. You established a calm, unwavering atmosphere in which truth could flourish, even when no one else believed in it. That's what makes you apart. You were not shielded by a strong family name, a support system, or status. You were exposed but did not break. You learned how to be your own anchor, covering, and compass. That isn't survival. That demonstrates spiritual mastery. People cannot explain that kind of power. People classify it as independent, intense, or harsh. People are terrified of what they cannot control, and they cannot control someone who refuses their approval, shelter, or acceptance. When your safety is internal, you pose a challenge to organizations that rely on fear and groupthink to operate. You don't need a crowd to feel comfortable. You do not need to belong to feel valuable. You do not need agreement to realize you are right. That is upsetting for people whose identities rely on acceptance. You created your safety via spirit, not society. That is why people are drawn to you despite their fear. You educate children what it means to be self-sufficient in a world that values reliance. The disturbing issue for them is that you are not bitter or cold. You are just whole. And nothing frightens a fragile system more than someone who does not need it to survive. Number 6. You don't just think differently. You feel at a frequency that interferes with their indoctrination. You don't just think outside the box. You exist on a whole other frequency. Your thought is not just unique. It's connected, and your heart is drawn to something authentic, ancient, and sacred. Most people are taught to respond to fear, ego, performance, and approbation, but you have moved your whole life to truth. That alone disrupts everything around you. You did not just change your thinking. You have purified your spirit. You cleansed your nervous system by engaging in inner work that most people avoid. You felt every betrayal. You sat by each trigger. You faced your own shadow. As a consequence, your energy becomes less erratic. It provides clarity. You are not vibrating with anxiety, animosity, or false identity. You are leaving behind peace, purpose, and spiritual integrity. That energy does not just enter a room. It causes the whole room to shake. People find it difficult to express how they feel when you enter. You don't say much, yet something changes. Some people feel drawn to you. Others feel vulnerable. Some people admire you. Others get defensive. Why? Because your presence reflects who they really are. Not the version they present, but the reality they hide. Your energy is not equivalent to the noise. It exposes it. They've been trained to respond to chaos, deception, and misplaced confidence. But you arrive grounded, tranquil, and fully connected. It's disconcerting for those who are built on their image. You don't just challenge their ideas. You disturb their whole operating system. You maintain a calm that seems aggressive, not because you are attacking, but because you are unable to cooperate. And after spending your whole life avoiding self-awareness, standing in front of someone who has mastered it is terrifying. You are not aggressive, yet your honesty is daring. You are not loud, yet your presence is imposing. You do not strive for superiority. You're just free. That is the part they can't fake. This is what makes you memorable. Your frequency exposes the falseness in their programming, and no matter how hard they try to ignore it, something about you leads them to reconsider what they thought was real. And that is power. Silent, spiritual, and unstoppable. But what about number 7? Your post is not about avoiding difficulty. It comes from mastering it. Your art is not the type that emerges from concealment, isolating, and avoiding conflict. Most people maintain a delicate surface level of calm until life disturbs them. Your work is the result of traveling through the flames, braving every storm, and refusing to give up. That's what makes it authentic. You did not wait for the uproar to subside. You learn how to sit in the middle of it without losing your mind. And that level of inner power attracts attention. Inquire and study. Do you enjoy that? Try to find out why you didn't break. You did not hide your sentiments in order to seem strong. You processed them. You confronted your triggers front on. You cried. You cracked. However, you never separated from yourself. Others avoided their agony. You entered the center and made peace with it. As a consequence, you become a person who does not give up when things become tough. You have no fear of discomfort. You have made peace with them. And it is rare. You're not at peace because life has become easier. You've got it because you've stopped running. You stayed while the others ran. You stayed composed in the face of others' panic. You learned to breathe through the turbulence and make sound decisions rather than rash ones. Of course, a book or a motivational speech cannot teach you this degree of emotional sovereignty. It can only be earned by experience, pain, truth and soul, and total surrender. People are now looking at you and feeling something they can't explain. You're not hyper. You are not passive. You're centered. And in a world full of response, that stability makes you seem superhuman. People underestimate the amount of self-mastery required to get here. They just know you move differently. You speak without fear. You go when your spirit believes it is time. You don't react, but instead reply. You do it all without trying to prove anything. They are looking at you because they have never seen someone so calm yet honest, so quiet but powerful. You did not just resist the tumult. You have conquered it. And that expertise resulted in a calm that lasts even when life throws a curveball at you. That is not the sort of power you display. You embody it. They sense it, even if they don't get it. Number 8, you accomplished it without selling out. This presents a hurdle to their strategy. You did not sacrifice your soul to succeed. And that alone makes folks nervous. In a world where most people rise by taking shortcuts, kissing up, or impersonating someone they are not, you stayed true. You didn't beg to be noticed. You did not sugarcoat your truth in order to become popular. You did not step on others in your pursuit of achievement. You still made it. That is what scares them. That's what breaks their unspoken rules. They built their approach on compromise. Smile when someone abuses you. Maintain silent in order to keep your seat. Change who you are, only enough to make others comfortable. This is how many people get favor, progress, and access. But you took a different road. You rejected the game. You did not need the table. You built your own. And now your accomplishment indicates that authenticity may be as effective, if not more so, than manipulation. Your tale exposes the explanations people use to justify their betrayal. They wanted to believe that selling out was the only option, that being fake was essential, and that complying to the crowd guaranteed survival. However, you are a contradiction to all of that. You didn't bend, yet you still broke through. People get concerned because they are now forced to ponder the possibility that they did not have to betray themselves after all. They just lacked the courage to be different. You demonstrate that telling the truth is not a weakness, that self-respect is not a barrier to success, and that you can move forward while being true to yourself. As a consequence, people either love or dislike you. There is seldom a middle ground among people who secretly compromise on everything. You are a live reminder of what they may have been. That is not just threatening. It's haunting. You did not use shortcuts. You took the long, quiet, and often lonely way, and it paid off. People who ascended while wearing masks are now terrified by your mere presence. You did not cooperate and did not promote your values. You are still higher than ever. That's not luck. This is what happens when you choose purpose above popularity. That's what happens when you bet on your soul instead of the system. And now they're investigating into you since you broke their rules yet still finished 9th place. You escaped the lab while they were still experimenting with fire. Initially, they did not identify you as a person. They regarded you as a test subject, someone to probe, prod, and push to see what would happen. They tested your limits with silent rejection, emotional manipulation, spiritual confinement, and social isolation. It was never just about confrontation. It was all about control. They wanted to know how hard they could push you before you broke, how much you could take before losing your mind, voice, or identity. However, they made a mistake in their calculations. They neglected to account for your spirit. They did not expect you to evaluate the setup while they were studying you and doing their tests, seeking to erode your confidence, trigger your trauma, and infect your self-esteem. You were collecting data. You were analyzing the patterns, identifying the techniques, and secretly preparing to depart. You didn't just survive that lab. You escaped with a blueprint. You become the variable that they were unable to predict. You didn't respond like the others. You did not conform, collapse, or lose your identity. In actuality, the tension improved your sharpness. The tampering improved your knowledge. And the solitude forced you within, where you discovered power. They had no clue. You weren't just their test. You were their mirror. And now, whenever they see you flourishing, it mirrors everything they failed to handle. That's why they're concerned now. Because you weren't supposed to find it out. You were not meant to live with your clarity, rationality, and power intact. But you did. Not only that, but you've developed into something people can't identify. You're no longer part of their system. You don't react to their triggers. You don't obey their rules or seek their approval. That renders you untraceable and uncontainable. They sought to cause a breakdown. They had a breakthrough. And now they're left trying to make sense of the oddball, the one they couldn't break, who now wields strength they never gave and knowledge they never taught. You escaped the lab while they were still experimenting with fire. They are now locked within their own experiment. And you are the proof. It backfired. Number 10. You did not give up on yourself just to fit in. And this becomes you unreadable. You did not trade your individuality for inclusion. And that is the only way you can stand out in a world that rewards uniformity. While most people shapeshift to be accepted, watering down, altering their personality, and disguising their depth, you clung to your truth with both hands, even when it jeopardized your relationships and kept you out of group chats, invitations, promotions, and recognition. You didn't fold. You kept it authentic. Your unwillingness to lose oneself is what makes you unintelligible to others who only understand acting. They're not sure how to cope with someone who can't be controlled by consent. Most people are readily influenced because they want approval. Flatter them, and they'll cooperate. Reject them, and they'll contract. Threaten them with exclusion, and they will silence their own voice. But you do not respond to any of this. You've embraced being misunderstood. You have mastered the capacity to be alone without feeling lonely. You choose alignment over applause, and it is rare. They cannot predict your next move since your decisions are not driven by insecurity. You do not seek attention. You do not need confirmation to feel valuable. You are not attempting to acquire favors. You're listening to your spirit. And when you act from essence rather than fear, your path is invisible to others who are still in survival mode. This is why you're labeled as secretive, intense, and difficult to grasp. You're not stating your intentions. You are not expressing your grief. You're advancing from a place most people haven't reached inside themselves. It's not arrogance. It is all about being real. And when someone's identity is based on acceptance, witnessing you be openly entire is both thrilling and irritating. You did not sacrifice your soul for convenience. You didn't reinvent yourself to be adored. And now you move with a distinct inner clarity. You do not manipulate and are not manipulated. That is the kind of presence that people feel but cannot explain. That is the type of energy that can move more than just rooms. It rewrites the rules. That is exactly why they are observing you. Because you stayed entire in a world where you had to break numbers. Your aura now looks like a handbook for those who betrayed you. They never imagined you to merge with such grace, clarity, and quiet power. When they tricked you, they thought they were silencing you, dimming your light, and maybe even teaching you a lesson. However, the only lesson they retained was the one you taught them. Not with your words, not with revenge, but with how you healed, evolved, and behaved thereafter. The same people who mocked your misery are now looking at you like pupils in the back of a classroom. They had not signed up for. They're learning quietly, awkwardly, and reluctantly because your life has become a mirror, a reflection of what they've messed up, a roadmap for how to face disaster while keeping discipline, dignity, and direction. You were the blueprint for everything they lacked. They have previously disrespected your boundaries. They're now mimicking them. They used to say you were too confident. Now they're striving to reproduce it. They used to believe your work was fake, but now they desire the same intensity since it has never lasted. They still won't say it out loud, but you become the silent standard by which they measure themselves. That's why they track your movements, analyze your captions, and record your silence. Because even when you don't say anything, you are still instructing. Your aura, your healed, grounded, untouchable presence has transformed into a manual which they studied with the same hands that threw stones. When they tricked you, they thought they had the last word, but progress won out. You didn't have to go back and prove anything. You just have to become it. And you did, not out of spite, but because to sovereignty. Not to validate, but to align. That's what worries them the most. You didn't progress despite them. You healed because you weren't going to stay broken. They no longer look at you with pride, but with wonder. And in the solitude of their own guilt, they finally understand the truth. They didn't just lose access to you. They lost access to a version of themselves that they might have grown if they hadn't broken the rule you were here to teach number. You did not recover only to be accepted. You healed and became unshakable. You did not emerge gentle, smiling, and obedient after experiencing so much misery, grief, betrayal, and disappointment. You did not recover only to be adored. You healed so that you may be free. You fought hard to be whole, not only to impress people who only helped you while you were broken. Small and easy to manipulate. This is why you stand apart. Because rather of shrinking to maintain the peace, you expanded into your full potential and did not apologize for it. Most people recover just enough to be accepted, function, and make others feel comfortable. But you didn't just survive. You proceeded to dig. You addressed elements of oneself. Others hide. You reveal the bitterness, shame, fear, and trauma rather than suppressing it. You changed it. And that kind of repair does not improve your likability. It makes you unshakable. They expected you to soften in order to reclaim their trust. They expected you to shrink in order to be welcomed again, but instead you returned stronger, clearer, and with more limits than ever before. That confused them. You did not seek closure. You didn't need validation. You did not await an apology. You healed without permission. And now the same people who once felt they had the power to break you are watching you build a life that they cannot have. Not because you are tough, but because you have outperformed their ability. They don't see how you can develop without their forgiveness or bloom without being welcomed back. How you're proceeding without their consent. This is because your healing did not entail reconnecting with them. It was about reconnecting with oneself. You weren't trying to make everyone else comfortable. You were learning to be comfortable with your own skin, truth, and spirit. And now you will not bend to keep people. You don't smile to be safe. You do not make your story more acceptable. You do not practice healing. You embody it. People are concerned about that sort of fullness because it is unrefined. It's real. And in a world that glorifies phony tranquility, your actual honesty is both unique and impressive. A number. You decoded a code meant to keep you spiritually clean. You were not only born into a family. You were born following a pattern. The cycle of silence, suppression, survival, and self-neglect. Generations before you swallow their truth in order to remain calm while smiling, hide sorrow, and pass on emotional debts disguised as tradition. Nobody spoke about it, but everyone felt it. The dysfunction was normalized. The dread was inherited, and the trauma was perpetuated. But then you showed here and broke the code. You questioned what others accepted. You noticed what others ignored. You felt what they numbed. Even if they told you to stop being so profound or sensitive, your soul knew you weren't nuts. You were being called. What was I supposed to do? No one else in your family has the courage, clarity, or wisdom to stop the spiritual poverty that had become a way of life. You refused to pass on what almost destroyed you. You stopped the cycle of emotional sabotage. You quit hiding the facts to make others feel comfortable. You stopped showing devotion to those who were dedicated to dysfunction. Everything changed the second you did it. You felt alone. You were not fully grasped, but you kept going. You kept pulling on the thread that no one else dared to touch. You destroyed a network that had held generations prisoner. Now you walk with a clarity they were never supposed to have. In silence, you may hear the truth. A smile is a good indicator of manipulation. You identify something that others say does not exist. This makes you a threat. Not because you are violent, but because you are free, and freedom always bothers people who are bound by fear. Your awakening did not occur at random. It was a lovely interruption. You were sent to shed light on a dark heritage. Because of this, you are being watched. They are unable to look away. Others are watching, casting judgment, and secretly hoping that your courage may inspire others. But they know deep down that you unlocked something ancient, and once cracked, it cannot be closed again. You did not just heal. You rewrote history. And this kind of power does more than just transform your life. It sends shockwaves throughout generations. That is why everyone is watching. This is why they are frightened. And that is why your name will be remembered long after the silence has subsided. A number. Your life became an example of divine timing. They felt you had missed your chance. They laughed at how long it took. They murmured about your delays, pauses, and quiet seasons. You were the person they mentioned. Never quite got it together. Too slow to become spiritual, too hesitant. While everyone else was rushing, hustling, and flaunting receipts, you were still in what seemed to be limbo, repairing, constructing, and listening. But what they didn't realize, and still don't understand, was that your timing was not off. It was divine. You weren't behind. You were in agreement. You weren't slow. You were being prepared. You did not arrive late. You arrived precisely when heaven intended your breakthrough. And now, people who previously pitted you are quietly following in your footsteps, attempting to understand the formula that guided you here without force, compromise, or noise. Your life has become a case study in divine timing, which is clear now. The peace you bring, the alignment you enter, the doors that open without your intervention. Abundance that flows instead of being auctioned off. Everything happened at a period that they are unable to replicate since it was not driven by desire. It originated from obedience. That's the part that irritates them because they rushed. They cut corners. They sought results. Many of them came just to realize that it was not authentic. It didn't last. It failed to fulfill expectations. And now they're fatigued, bewildered, and quietly watching you because you did things differently. You didn't pound yourself into dust. You did not rush into trauma. You waited, trusted, and flowed. Your presence today exposes the illusion that everything has to be done swiftly. You demonstrate that waiting is not a sign of weakness. It is prudent that divine purpose does not appear on demand, that the most powerful motions come after moments of silence. They are now observing you since you have disrupted their habit of hurrying. Because your experience challenged their belief that late equals lost, you prove that God's timing is not only true, but also beneficial. Being patient comes at a cost. You weren't late. You were created by eternity for a time that would not occur until you were totally prepared. And now that it has here, they are unable to look away, because they are seeing your amazing timing for the first time. You did not just survive in a world out to break you. You changed the laws of survival. Every adversity you faced, every time you were underestimated, just developed the power that now makes you unbeatable. You go beyond the requirement for approval, beyond the need to fit in, beyond accepting fake calm. Instead, you built your shelter from inside, weathered your storms, and aligned with a timing that beyond any human timescale. You now stand in stark contrast to every system that has sought to dominate you. Your experience provides a blueprint for spiritual strength and inner sovereignty, a subtle lesson for those who had previously questioned you, and a lighthouse for those who still seek the truth. They study you not because they understand you, but because they see a power that they cannot contain or duplicate. You achieve not by submitting or conceding, but by demonstrating your true power. And that is why you are being watched, since you illustrate that true freedom does not stem from conformity. It results from breaking free. Remember this. Your story is not solely your own. It's a disruption, a declaration, and a revolution all in one. So on your road, keep walking in your truth and believe that your very presence is already having an impact on the world around you. You made it. And now they can't stop watching. If this message sparked something in your soul, don't dismiss it. Subscribe to the channel and activate notifications, since this is just the start of our deeper journey together. Each movie is intended to instill vitality, vigor, and clarity in your spirit. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. If this video resonated with you, it informs the algorithm that this message is essential and assists in getting it in front of the individuals who need it the most. Leave a comment below. Please share what struck you the most. Your voice might be the confirmation that someone else has been looking for. Most importantly, share this with someone who is breaking habits, healing freely, and rising on their own terms. You never know how much it will connect with them. This isn't just content. It's a movement. And if you're here, you're already part of it. So stay connected, grounded, and continue soaring. God bless you.